Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, your gateway to the wild, shocking, and unforgettable side of cinema. Today, we're diving deep into the dark world of German exploitation films. The movies so bold, so controversial, they sparked bans, seizures, and outrage across the globe. From shocking horror to twisted underground art, these films dared to go where no one else would. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more incredible journeys into the hidden corners of film history. And as you're watching, let us know in the comments which of these controversial movies shocked you the most. 1. Schoolgirl Report. What Parents Don't Believe is Possible, 1970. When it hit German theaters in 1970, Schoolgirl Report, Schulmädchen Report, wasn't just a film, it was a cultural bombshell. Marketed as a daring, documentary-style drama, the movie claimed to be based on real interviews and surveys about the secret lives of teenage girls. What audiences got, however, was a sensationalized blend of pseudo-education and shocking scenarios that pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on screen. Its format was groundbreaking for its time, a series of loosely connected vignettes exploring taboo topics, all presented as if they were exposing hidden truths that parents supposedly refused to acknowledge. But underneath the veneer of social commentary was a provocative exploitation angle that critics immediately slammed as voyeuristic. Despite, or perhaps because of, the outrage, Schoolgirl Report became a box office phenomenon in West Germany. It tapped into the era's shifting morals, appealing to curiosity while stirring debates about censorship, youth culture, and the line between education and exploitation. The film's massive success spawned an entire franchise of 13 sequels throughout the 1970s, each testing audiences' limits a little further. Today, Schoolgirl Report is remembered less as a serious exposé and more as a symbol of German exploitation cinema at its most controversial. For some, it stands as a fascinating cultural artifact of the sexual revolution. For others, it's a reminder of how easily cinema could blur the line between social commentary and sensationalism. Would you call Schoolgirl Report bold social commentary or just shameless exploitation? Tell us in the comments below. 2. Der Fan, 1982. The disturbing obsession that shocked Germany. When it comes to German exploitation cinema, few films sparked as much outrage and lasting fascination as Der Fan, The Fan, released in 1982. On the surface, it looks like a simple story about teenage obsession, but what unfolds is one of the most unsettling portrayals of celebrity worship ever committed to film. The movie follows Simone, a lonely teenage girl who becomes dangerously obsessed with her favorite pop singer, simply known as R. At first, her obsession feels harmless. She listens to his music, writes him letters, and dreams of meeting him. But when her fantasies finally come true, the story takes a disturbing and unforgettable turn. Instead of a romantic fantasy, Simone's encounter with R spirals into a nightmare of manipulation, violence, and cannibalism. The shocking climax, where devotion transforms into destruction, was so graphic and taboo-breaking that German audiences were left speechless. Some theaters even pulled the film, calling it a moral threat to youth. But controversy only fueled its legacy. Critics debated whether Der Fan was a feminist critique of toxic celebrity culture or just pure exploitation cinema designed to provoke. Either way, the film's cold, hypnotic style and unsettling synth soundtrack made it unforgettable and ensured it earned a cult following worldwide. Today, Der Fan is often remembered as one of Germany's most chilling exploitation films, a dark time capsule of 1980s obsession and the dangers of blind devotion. For many horror and cult film fans, it's more than a movie, it's a disturbing experience you never quite shake off. 3. Mark of the Devil, 1970. Few films pushed boundaries in German exploitation cinema like Mark of the Devil, 1970. Marketed with the shocking tagline, "Positively the most horrifying film ever made," and even handed out vomit bags to audiences during screenings, this movie made controversy its greatest weapon. Set during the height of witch trials in 18th century Europe, the story follows witch hunters who use torture, corruption, and brutality to exploit innocent victims, all under the guise of religion and justice. The film's unflinching scenes of graphic torture, burnings, and sexual violence were so extreme that it was outright banned or heavily censored in several countries, including the UK, where it received a notorious video nasties label in the 1980s. What made Mark of the Devil stand out from earlier horror films like Witchfinder General was its unapologetic commitment to realism. The makeup effects, grotesque torture devices, and relentless cruelty left audiences stunned, many calling it exploitation at its ugliest, while others praised it as a chilling critique of authoritarian abuse and religious hypocrisy. Despite the backlash, the film became a cult classic and a box office success. Its notoriety only grew when lead actor Udo Kier, who later became an international star, distanced himself from the project, admitting he couldn't stomach watching the film in its entirety. Today, Mark of the Devil remains one of the most infamous exploitation films ever released, symbolizing the moment when German filmmakers stopped playing it safe and proved that sometimes controversy is the best marketing tool of all. For Schramm, 1993. If there was ever a German exploitation film that truly divided audiences, it's Georg Buckereit's Schramm, 1993. Known internationally as Schramm, Into the Mind of a Serial Killer asterisk, the film is less a traditional horror story and more a disturbing psychological descent into the fractured mind of a murderer. The movie follows Lothar Schramm, a seemingly quiet man who hides behind a polite, neighborly facade but secretly lives as a brutal serial killer. What makes Schramm so controversial isn't just the violence. It's the way Buckereit forces viewers to live inside Schramm's head. Hallucinations, flashbacks, and twisted fantasies blur the line between reality and madness, making the audience complicit in his dark urges. At the time of its release, critics accused the film of being exploitative for the sake of shock value, especially given its graphic depictions of sex, blood, and body horror. Some countries outright banned it, while others slapped it with heavy restrictions. Yet, defenders of the film argue that it isn't pure gore. It's an art house nightmare that explores loneliness, sexual repression, and the fragile boundary between sanity and violence. Schramm cemented Buckereit's reputation as a provocateur of underground German cinema, standing alongside his earlier infamous works like Nekromantik. Today, the film has become a cult classic, feared, hated, but also studied for its raw, experimental filmmaking. Whether you see it as art or exploitation, Schramm remains one of Germany's most infamous cinematic gut punches. 6. Violent, 1989. By the late 1980s, German exploitation cinema had already built a reputation for pushing the boundaries of taste, but few films rattled audiences quite like Violent, in 1989. Directed with a raw, guerrilla-style approach, this underground shocker felt less like a polished movie and more like a disturbing videotape smuggled out of some forbidden vault. What made it so controversial wasn't just its relentless title, already a red flag for censors across Europe, but its almost documentary-like style. The filmmakers deliberately blurred the line between fiction and reality, presenting its grim sequences with such gritty realism that many viewers at the time genuinely questioned if they were watching something real. This illusion was no accident. It was part of the film's marketing strategy, feeding into the forbidden fruit allure that made exploitation films so profitable in underground markets. Censorship boards in Germany and beyond reacted harshly. The movie was banned outright in several regions, with critics calling it irresponsible, morally corrupt, and even dangerous. Yet, for fans of extreme cult cinema, Violent quickly became a sought-after title. Pirated VHS copies circulated in hidden rental shops and fan conventions, only fueling its legendary status as one of the most notorious German exploitation releases of the decade. Today, Violent lives on as a symbol of how far filmmakers were willing to go in testing the limits of free expression, and how censorship battles only amplified the underground fame of movies that many authorities wished would vanish. 7. The Burning Moon, 1992. If there's one German exploitation movie that truly earned its place in cinematic infamy, it's Olaf Ittenbach's The Burning Moon. Released in 1992, this underground shocker quickly became notorious as one of the most violent and unrelenting splatter films ever produced in Europe. The story is deceptively simple. A troubled young man tells his little sister a pair of bedtime stories. But these aren't fairy tales. What unfolds are two ultra-violent nightmares drenched in gore, blasphemy, and shocking imagery. The first tale follows a deranged killer on a date gone horribly wrong, while the second, called The Purity, depicts a sadistic priest who commits unspeakable crimes. By the time the film reaches its finale, set in the fiery depths of hell, viewers are left reeling from a barrage of disturbing images that pushed censorship boards to their breaking point. Censors in Germany were horrified. In fact, The Burning Moon was outright banned and confiscated shortly after release, with authorities labeling it immoral and unsuitable for public viewing. Copies were destroyed, and its director Olaf Ittenbach found himself thrust into the underground horror hall of fame. Yet, like many films too shocking for mainstream audiences, it gained cult status internationally, spreading through bootlegs and whispered recommendations among horror collectors. Today, The Burning Moon is remembered not just as one of the goriest German exploitation films ever made, but also as a symbol of artistic rebellion against censorship. For fans of extreme cinema, it remains both a disturbing rite of passage and a reminder that some filmmakers are willing to push boundaries far beyond what audiences, or governments, are ready to accept. 8. Der Todesking, 1990. The King of Death. In 1990, German underground filmmaker Georg Buttgereit, already infamous for his shocking cult film Nekromantik, delivered another deeply disturbing piece of exploitation cinema, Der Todesking, The King of Death. Unlike traditional films with a linear plot, Der Todesking unfolds as a series of 7 interconnected vignettes, each tied to a different day of the week. Every story revolves around the themes of death, despair, and self-destruction, creating a nightmarish meditation on the fragility of human existence. The film opens with a chilling metaphor, a decaying corpse sitting on a bed, a stark visual symbol that recurs between the stories, reminding viewers of mortality's inescapable grip. Each segment introduces an ordinary person who ultimately succumbs to acts of extreme violence or suicide. From a woman gunning down strangers in a cinema to a man consumed by loneliness and poison, Buttgereit forces audiences to confront the darkest corners of human psychology. What made Der Todesking especially controversial was not just its graphic imagery, but its refusal to provide moral distance. There are no heroes, no redemption arcs, and no clear narrative safety net. The audience is left adrift in pure nihilism, an unsettling experience that led many critics to label the film as dangerous, irresponsible, and even anti-human. Censors in Germany and across Europe struggled with the movie. While it was not outright banned like Buttgereit's Nekromantik, Der Todesking was frequently restricted, heavily criticized in the press, and condemned as a death film that glorified self-destruction. Some art house defenders argued the opposite, that Buttgereit was using shocking exploitation tropes to craft a grim social commentary on alienation, violence, and mortality in late 20th century Europe. Despite the outrage, Der Todesking slowly gained cult status. Its unconventional storytelling and haunting imagery secured Buttgereit a permanent place in the pantheon of extreme German exploitation cinema. Today, the film is studied not only as a work of shock art but also as a psychological exploration of the human obsession with death. For audiences willing to endure its unsettling structure and bleak tone, Der Todesking remains one of the most polarizing and thought-provoking German exploitation films ever made, a movie that dares to ask, what happens when life loses all meaning? 9. Nekromantik, 1987. When it comes to controversial German exploitation cinema, few titles are as infamous or as shocking as Nekromantik, 1987. Directed by Jörg Buttgereit, this underground cult film didn't just push boundaries, it obliterated them. The story follows Rob Schmatke, a man with a very peculiar obsession. He works for a street cleaning company that disposes of accident victims, and in the process, he secretly collects body parts. When Rob brings home a decaying corpse for himself and his girlfriend, their twisted relationship spirals into disturbing territory. What makes Nekromantik so notorious is not just the grotesque imagery, but the fact that it was made with a strange sense of artistic seriousness. Unlike many grindhouse films of the era, Buttgereit's vision blended romance, horror, and surreal black comedy into a bizarre meditation on love, death, and decay. Upon release, Nekromantik was banned, censored, and outright condemned in many countries, including Germany itself. Police raided video stores, screenings were shut down, and even possession of the film was questioned by authorities. Yet, this heavy-handed censorship only fueled its cult status, turning it into one of the most legendary underground films in exploitation history. Despite its reputation, Buttgereit himself insisted that Nekromantik wasn't created merely for shock value. He wanted to explore themes of loneliness, obsession, and the darker side of human desire, albeit in the most extreme way imaginable. Today, Nekromantik remains one of the most controversial German films ever produced. While mainstream audiences often dismiss it as grotesque, cult cinema fans regard it as a milestone in transgressive filmmaking, a piece of underground art that dared to go where no other movie would. Whether you see it as an unwatchable provocation or a bold piece of cinematic art, one thing is certain: Nekromantik has secured its place in exploitation film history as a shocking reminder of just how far cinema can push cultural taboos. 10. Nekromantik 2, 1991. If you thought the first Nekromantik, 1987, was already the ultimate cinematic taboo, Jörg Buttgereit returned in 1991 with a sequel that pushed boundaries even further. Nekromantik 2 is one of the most notorious German exploitation films ever made, part horror, part erotic drama, and part surreal art experiment, and it instantly cemented itself as one of the most banned, censored, and debated films in European cinema history. The story follows Monika, a lonely woman in Berlin who becomes obsessed with Rob, the corpse-loving anti-hero from the first film. After digging up his decomposing body, Monika begins a twisted romance that explores themes of death, love, and obsession. At the same time, she tries to balance this secret with a budding relationship with a living boyfriend. The result is a shocking contrast between ordinary romance and grotesque intimacy with the dead, an intentional artistic clash designed to disturb audiences. What made Nekromantik 2 so controversial wasn't just the graphic necrophilia imagery, but also the way it blended art house sensibilities with exploitation shock value. It wasn't filmed like a cheap splatter flick. Buttgereit shot it in a strangely beautiful, almost romantic style, which unsettled audiences even more. It dared to present necrophilia not simply as shock, but as a subject of emotional exploration. That was unheard of in 1991. The backlash was immediate. German authorities confiscated copies of the film just days after its premiere in Munich, labeling it obscene and socially dangerous. Police even raided video stores that carried it, making Nekromantik 2 one of the few movies in German history to face an official government seizure. Ironically, this only gave it cult status, as horror fans worldwide began seeking bootleg VHS copies, passing them hand-to-hand in underground film circles. Over time, critics and academics re-evaluated the film. While mainstream audiences still find it offensive, many now consider it an underground masterpiece of transgressive cinema. Buttgereit himself has said that his goal wasn't to shock for shock's sake, but to explore taboo emotions, asking uncomfortable questions about death, intimacy, and repression in modern society. Today, Nekromantik 2 remains banned in several countries, but also celebrated at cult film festivals. It is a reminder that German exploitation cinema wasn't just about gore, It was also about breaking cinematic rules and pushing the limits of free expression. Whether you see it as art, trash, or both, there's no denying that Nekromantik 2 is one of the most controversial German exploitation films ever released. Would you dare to watch Nekromantik 2 knowing it was once seized by police for being too dangerous for society? Tell us in the comments if you think it's art or pure madness. And there you have it, the 10 most controversial German exploitation movies ever released. Love them or hate them, these films carved their names into cinema history by pushing boundaries no one else dared to cross. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more hidden gems, shocking stories, and untold film history. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these movies do you think was the most outrageous or unforgettable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, this is Globewise Entertainment, bringing you the wildest stories from the world of cinema.